Okay, any of you out there who are ISO 9001 certified or looking to become certified are aware of some of the changes to the 2015 version of 9001 coming down the pike. In particular, the emphasis on risk management. Some of you might be a little worried about how you even handle risk. I mean, isn't this just going to be another overwhelming task that you need to tackle along with all the other overwhelming tasks that you do in your job day to day, the other documentation and so forth that you need to handle in order to achieve or maintain your ISO 9001 certification? Isn't it just going to pile on? Well, maybe not. And that's the topic of the article, Hacking Risk Management, by Glen Fraser, one of this week's stories in Quality Digest Daily. And Glen just happens to be with us this morning via phone from Copenhagen, Denmark. Hey, Glen.
Hello.
So first of all, well, by the way, I wish we were there with you in Copenhagen, Denmark. Sounds like it's beautiful over there.
Very much so.
Better here in sweltering Chico today. Well, first of all, just briefly, tell us a little bit about how risk management is going to be a part of ISO 9001 2015. What will auditors most likely be looking for?
Sure. Well, as part of a general direction, I think you can safely say that all of the standards are moving to incorporate risk management at some level. What 9001 2015, and as you mentioned, still in its draft phases, is doing is really broadening and elevating this idea of risk management. Even the older ISO 9001 had specific references to risk, but not a lot of guidance. So the new standard, the new proposed, is to elevate the idea of risk management up to a much higher priority. It emphasizes that there are system-wide risks that can be a concern outside of just products, say, or HR. It can include customers, employees, vendors, risks to the environment, communities. There's just a recognition that risks are everywhere. And it also has companies try and balance frequency, probability, likelihood, whatever your chosen term, versus the impact, the severity of potential events. So what it's really looking for companies to do is to evaluate places where they've got risk and make sure that there's a process in place for identifying them, understanding them, and managing those risks. Auditors are really looking for that process, making sure that the organization is understanding where their risks are and basing their actions on that. You know, again, risk's been around for quite a while, and FDA especially has been pushing the concept of risk-based corrective action for a little while, quite a while.
Well, I mean, so
this is really just elevating it.
What you just described, I mean, to me that sounds a little overwhelming. I mean, risk can be in any part of the organization. You've got to think about it. You've got to cover it. I mean, but in your article you say it doesn't have to be an overwhelming task. So are you saying that maybe a lot of people are just kind of overthinking this whole thing?
I do believe they are. And what I believe is that true risk management, understanding your risks, responding to them, can be an evolution, a journey. So it can start out relatively simple. It does not need to be overly complex. But a lot of people want to jump, they want to run before they walk, to use the expression, or crawl, whatever you prefer. But the idea is that it doesn't have to be. It truly does not. I would argue that every organization is already managing risk. Whether they're calling it that or not, everybody's doing it. There are risks in every action we take. There are risks in not taking action. So companies are used to dealing with repercussions and strategizing and reacting and trying to be proactive. All of those are risk management, just with different labels.
Well, Glen, let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use, because you do talk about this in your article, the tools that you can use to I guess, quantify and assess risk. You mentioned three again. You mentioned the decision tree, risk matrix, and risk reporting and trending. In your experiences, which of these are the most useful?
I'd say, back to that earlier statement, it is a journey. So organizations should pick a tool, a methodology that matches both their operation and the sort of risk work that they've already done, whether they've called it risk assessment or not. So smaller organization, they can use this idea of a decision tree. Many organizations would call it a script, or I know to follow a certain set of steps. I answer a question, I follow a path. It can be represented as a flow chart. People who have a better handle on severity, likelihoods, they can go to a risk matrix. But those are only a couple of the tools. There's many others that are out there. Virtually every manufacturer I've ever spoken to does some sort of FMEA, failure mode, on their products. It's just another way of measuring risk. And we've also got risk surveys. Oh, sorry.
And I think you said that to a certain extent, whether they call it these things or not, people probably do have some of these tools already in place. I think you call it the decision tree, while other people, like you said, may just have a script in case this happens, or in this situation, do this, that, and the other. And you're saying that's essentially the same as a decision tree?
That is correct. Yep.
So a lot of people, so basically I think kind of the upshot, and you'll be getting into this in a webinar next week, but it sounds like what you're saying is basically kind of leveraging the tools that you may already be using. You don't necessarily have to go out on a limb and start learning all sorts of new stuff. It's just recognizing maybe what you already have in place and how to leverage that into your ISO 9001 documentation and process and so forth.
Correct. And then being able to take advantage of some of that data that you've gathered over time and make sure that you've covered all of your risks. Data is incredibly important as a company matures and starts to gather a history. We'd often call it a risk register, a list of items and risk items or hazards, controls that we've got in place. You can start to build a library, and eventually companies can even start to automate part of that risk assessment based on history. Based on data that you've accumulated within your organization, you could start to, I don't particularly like the word predict, but you could start to understand how likely something is to happen and have a tool suggest a likelihood.
Okay.
The impact, the outcome is generally known. You can decide that with a group of experts. So you can really start to standardize risk once you start to build some history and have common definitions of risk across your organization. It's something you can grow into quite easily.
Okay, well, Glenn, thanks for that. And actually, we're going to be joining Glenn again next week, right? Yeah, Tuesday, October 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for the webinar, Hacking Risk Management. Dirk, you're going to be hosting that or moderating that with Glenn?
Along with Glenn, that's right.
That's right.
Okay, well, Glenn, thanks for joining us this morning, or this evening in your case.
Thank you for having me.
All right, enjoy Copenhagen.
Yeah, enjoy Europe. We'll see you then, Glenn.
Yes.
So,
bye-bye. Yeah, we look forward to that one, Dirk, on Tuesday.
Going
to be a good webinar. We just kind of scratched the surface there, but certainly, as we mentioned, if you're thinking about risk management, if you're doing risk management already, tune in for the webinar on Tuesday, and you can actually check. Believe you can actually go through Glenn's article.
Yes.
And you can register for the
if
webinar.
you go to the article, Hacking Risk Management, down at the bottom of the article, there's a link that you can go out to the webinar and sign up.
That's all right. Okay.